The oldest and strongest human emotion is fear. And the oldest and strongest type of fear is trepidation of the unknown. When we were children, our parents told us that monsters didn't exist. But we were sure that something was lurking under the bed or in the closet. Fear sees, even if our eyes are closed. Welcome to the realm of the arcane. My name is Lon Strickler. Join me as I examine unexplained creatures, strange manifestations, and remarkable realities. Imagine this next hour as a voyage of discovery to strange lands, seeking not for new territory, but for new knowledge of the supernatural. Come on board as we begin this adventure together. Hey folks, good evening and welcome to another episode of Arcane Radio. I'm your host, Lon Strickler, and I thank you for joining me here on the Paranormal King Radio Network. Now, before I introduce my guest, I'd like to present an account that was recently forwarded to me. The witness states, about 2 years ago, I had an encounter with something I can't explain. And the reason I'm writing is because I saw some strange footprints yesterday where I encountered it 2 years ago. He said he lives in Finland near the coast. Now, 2 years ago, I was out hunting and it was getting late and dark, so I decided to head back home. I had about a 2 or 3 kilometer walk through the forest to get to my car. It had gotten pitch black outside, and at this point, so I had an LED headlamp for light as I walked. Now, as I walked, I kept hearing unusually loud sounds. I knew something big was moving. I was 100% sure it was a moose, as I've encountered lots of those in the forest, and they do make a lot of noise and vibrations when they walk. Now, I couldn't see anything, though it was getting closer to me. Now, all of a sudden, this super awful smell hits me. It smells like feces and something really rotten. My hair stands up, and I raise my shotgun as my whole body instinctively tells me to run. I just stand still and listen. And as the sounds get closer, I see what looks like a humanoid figure standing on 2 feet, really tall, and it had easily be over 2 meters, but slender and muscular at the same time, and kind of crouched down posture. It looked almost like a werewolf from the movies, but at the same time, it wasn't. It was quite far away, so my light barely went that far, but I could still see it. Its eyes shined red from my LED headlamp as well. It looked at me for about 3 seconds, made no sounds. But it was breathing weirdly. I think it could smell the 2 ducks I had in my backpack. It slowly walked away. I even filmed a little bit of it as it started walking, and with my iPhone, but it's poor quality as my phone at the time was fairly old and it was dark, so you can't really see it, just hear a lot of the noise. Anyway, I told some friends and fellow hunters. A couple have heard and seen strange things as well, but nothing like that. So I don't know what he saw, but it's kind of par for the course for a lot of the reports we've been getting around here in Pennsylvania, though that's in Finland. It's interesting to get a report over in Europe occasionally.
Right.
But these upright beings, call them either canines and of course Bigfoot. It's a worldwide phenomenon. So let's get started.
Okay. All right. Sounds good.
Tonight's guest is Mack Maloney, who's a UFO military author as well as a radio host. Mack has written more than 50 novels, including military thrillers, men's action adventures, science fiction, and historical fiction. He created the long-running Wingman series with 1 million copies sold. His most recent nonfiction title is Mack Maloney's Haunted Universe, and he is also the host of Mack Maloney's Military X-Files. He has also worked as a consultant to a company working with the U.S. government on anti-terrorist programs. Mack is a native of Boston and a graduate of Emerson College. His website can be found at mackmaloney.com. So, Mack, thanks for joining me.
Thanks, Lon. Thanks for having me on.
Been a while since we talked.
Right, it sure has.
I think you just published UFOs and Military. I think that was your the book was when the last time I talked to you. So that's been about 4 years ago, I guess.
Right, yeah, UFOs in wartime, yeah.
Yeah. So, that's been several years, and you and I had a discussion at the time referencing the Foo Fighter phenomenon over Europe during World War II. Now, since that talk, I wanted to ask you if you believe that these are the same lights or the same phenomena that pilots have encountered during other conflicts and even modern day sightings.
Yeah, I think they were all part of the same thing for sure. The whole idea of UFOs in wartime, the whole idea to even write a book was we were having a discussion once, my editor and I, like at a 3 martini lunch type thing. And, I said, it just seems like, I read a lot of UFO books growing up as a kid, and it always was in my mind that it seems like more UFOs are seen more during wartime than peacetime. And I just threw that out, and he said, well, that's interesting. Why would that be? And I said, I don't know, more people looking up at the sky, more people flying, more chances to spot UFOs, who knows? So that's how that book came about, and we just, put together a couple hundred stories on instances where UFOs showed up, during times of war. Lots, as you say, the Foo Fighters in World War II is probably the example that most people remember, but there were a lot of them over Korea, over Vietnam, World War I as well, in between the wars. So we don't really know the answer, if UFOs show up in wartime more than peacetime, but I think we make a pretty good case that people see more UFOs during wartime. Is it because they're here because it's wartime, or as I said before, are people just kind of looking up at the sky more?
Yeah, I've heard a lot of different theories about what people think it is. People say, well, maybe it's the stress and, they're seeing things or whatever, or just are mistaking it for ordnance or. Mm-hmm. I don't think that's the case. I think you're right. I think there's something behind it. I remember you mentioning at the time that it does seem that aerial phenomena is very prevalent during conflict here on Earth. And if it is some time of extraterrestrial phenomena, maybe they're appearing as as watchers or sentinels of some type. Mm-hmm.
Right. Or, I think we talked about this too. It could be something as, quote unquote, simple as they may be time tourists where, they could be from our future coming back to see, history being made. And some people like come back and see, military history being made. So, it might be something along those lines. But one thing, though, I wanted to say on top of what you were saying was, people say, well, maybe it's the stress of war on pilots and so on. Military pilots generally, but military pilots especially, are the best, reporters of UFOs because they're flying around up there all the time. They know when they know what the planet Venus looks like. They know what they know what a comet looks like. They know what, reflections off the ocean from oil rigs look like. So if they see something that they haven't seen before, then it's a UFO, it's right. Then if they think it's unusual, then it sure is unusual.
Well, there was also a theory that maybe the Nazis had some type of secret weapon that they were using or employing to kind of cause some type of disruption with the bombers and such. Right. I don't know how much of that you buy into.
I don't buy into any of the Nazi / UFO thing because, and we talk about this on our show, a lot. And we talk about in UFOs in wartime as well, is, who knows why people want to kind of link these two things, but you have to just, think for a second that in 1943, the Germans, fielded the first jet fighter ever, Me-262, okay? And it was a real jet fighter. It was a real danger. It came too late in the war really to do anything for them. But it was a true jet fighter. The cockpits of Me-262s were made of plywood, because the German military machine, the German war machine, couldn't afford the steel that that would have protected the pilot. Certainly, they just couldn't afford it. They couldn't afford to put the best materials in their jet fighters. Then how would they have UFOs, and how would they have disruptors and ray guns, and a base on the moon and a base in Antarctica and everything? They lost the war. If they had any kind of technology like that, why did they lose the war? So I don't buy any of that Nazis had UFO help or help from aliens or whatever. It just doesn't. If you look at the the facts, after World War II, the United States went through, and Russia went through everything any German scientist ever did. We took a lot of that technology. We took Nazi scientists. They put us on the moon. They found absolutely no evidence that the Nazis were building UFOs or had nuclear, the Bell and nuclear power and anti-grav. None of it holds up. It's all just myth.
Yeah, I read as much as possible as far as Operation Paperclip after the war, and I really didn't see anything that really proved or even gave much basis to any of those theories. Though it seems to prevail all the time. I mean, it seems like every time you turn around and the Nazi comes up here and there, and the Germans developed this or possibly developed that, and I just don't see it as well.
No, I mean, they did have these things. They're wonder weapons. There's no doubt about it. The V1, V2 rockets. They were the first ones to develop a TV bomb. They actually had a bomb that they would drop from an airplane, and the bombardier would guide it down with a television set. It was like the first smart weapon. They did have these things, but they didn't have the military, the capacity, the national capacity to build these things, in numbers that would have had some effect in the war, because they were getting bombed round the clock for 4 years, and they were just running out of stuff. They were running out of rubber. They ran out of oil. That's how they invented synthetic oil practically. And so anyone who we have on the show sometimes makes that argument. I just say, well, if they had all, once again, go back to it. If they had all this technology, why did they lose the war?
Exactly. So your newest book, The Haunted Universes, it's full of a lot of possible UFO military connections and a wide variety of unusual events. Now, you've had several strange encounters as well. Can you describe some of your better personal events, personal encounters?
Well, I've never seen a UFO. I have to say that I wish that I have, and I'm looking every day, but I have this feeling that if you're looking for UFOs, you're never going to see one. It seems like the people who I'm looking for them are the ones that see them. It's kind of, and I think in itself that's kind of a phenomena. Ghosts, things like that, just not for me. The only real thing that I can point to is, we at college, when I was in college, a bunch of us, rented a house, and we all had, were assigned a bedroom. In my bedroom, for some reason, it seemed like I could hear, no matter when I was in there, I could hear like voices, almost like there were voices talking in the next room over, but it would happen when I was alone. And I remember going outside once and seeing, am I hearing next door neighbors? And it wasn't. It's never happened to me before or since, but just in this one particular room for 1 year. And I'd kind of get used to it. It was kind of funny, but I would hear like conversations going on, and there was no one there. But that's the closest I've ever really got to something paranormal.
Yeah, you've really did a lot of research for this book. I mean, there's a lot of different things in there. It's just not UFOs. It's a lot of different stuff. I recommend it to anybody. It's very well done. It's got a lot of good references to it.
Thanks.
What's your favorite story out of your book, anyway?
Well, wow.
You can tell as many as you want to talk about. That's fine with me.
I think there's more. I never really sat down and counted exactly how many stories are in there. It's about 250 to 300, and for some reason, I'm like kind of partial to ghost airplane stories.
Yeah.
And there's one without getting bogged down in the dates and times and everything, exact dates. But basically, what happened was it was in the 80s, and out in Los Angeles, in the Los Angeles area, there's an airport. It's a semi-private airport. It's called John Wayne Airport. It's in Orange County. Okay, where a lot of the Hollywood, the beautiful people live, right? So it's one of these places where you can't take off before 8 a.m. and you can't land after 8 p.m. because of noise restrictions. And a lot of these people, basically, it's the private planes for the stars. That's where they hang them and have them maintained and stuff. So anyway, one Sunday morning, one of these little racing planes that you see, they're like all fuselage and engine, it's a racing plane,
right?
A one-man racing plane. One of them shows up over this airport a Sunday morning, is around 7 a.m, and started doing aerobatics over the airport. So now it was in violation of the noise restriction. So a computer automatically generated a warning letter to the owner and automatically sent it to the owner. And the reason they knew whose plane it was so many witnesses saw it, they were able to write down the tail number on the plane.
Right.
Okay. So as it turns out, the plane belonged to one of the Mercury astronauts, one of the original Mercury astronauts, and he and now people knew how many times that that he flew a lot, that he after he retired from NASA, he flew a lot. He flew out of this airport every once in a while, and so. Well, as it turned out, though, this morning that these people saw this going on with a lot of witnesses, he had died like 4 hours before.
Oh.
And he was, and no one could ever explain it. No one could ever explain it. That was one of my favorite ones. There's a lot of, just a compilation of stories about in the UK. Which is like an especially haunted place. Everyone I think knows what Spitfires, are. They were the
right.
plane that the British used in the Battle of Britain and all through World War II. And, it's a really cool plane. It's kind of almost like a sports car plane, has a Rolls-Royce engine in it and so on. People still see these things flying over old airfields in England. And I think there's something like 39 Spitfires are still flying. They are in flying conditions. A lot of them are in museums. Some of them are down in Argentina and so on. But there was, let's say maybe a couple dozen in England that they use for, aerial parades and, to fly over the palace during the Queen's birthday, that kind of stuff. So they know where all these are. Yet people see the Spitfires flying over these old auxiliary bases they used during World War II. The people are able to, once again, write down the numbers and check back. And it turns out, that plane hasn't been, plane has been seen in, 100 years or something, or since the war. And it happens so much over there. It's very strange. People see ghost airplanes flying around a lot in England, and they're always these kind of World War II planes, they're almost like stuck in time or something. So I like the ghost airplane stories. We talk about strange places around the world. There's a place in Russia called Kaspunya, where Kaputnya, and it's a combination of Area 51 and Lake Cape Canaveral, let's say. Wow. And this is where they launch a lot of their military stuff, but they also store lots of nuclear weapons. There was a UFO sighting over there in the, I believe it was in the late 70s or early 80s, where a UFO hovered over the nuclear storage sites of this place for more than a half hour. 30 people saw it. It was in the middle of the night, and it was, just once again well documented. Now, the strange thing about it is that the people who went in to investigate it and to, take people's testimony was the KGB. Now, you're not going to lie to the KGB. You know what I mean? You're not going to lie to them. Why lie to them? And they have like 30 eyewitnesses reports about this UFO coming very close to their nuclear storage facilities. Things like that, just odd places around the world, odd events that happen around the world. And really the book was, I had so much research left over from doing the previous books, UFOs in Wartime, and another book I did called Beyond Area 51 Plus. We used a lot of research on the show, and I worked for Turner Broadcasting for a while for their website called Conspiratorium. We used to deal with weird stories all the time. So I had all this research here in my office, and I said, why don't we just, compile it in a book like this and put it out? And that's what happened, and, people like it.
Yeah, it's a cool book. It's got a lot of different stuff in there. You were mentioning the UFO seen around nuclear facilities in the old Soviet Union. It's interesting that when the Soviet Union fell and some of the stories started coming out of Russia, it's a wonder we never had a nuclear. I mean, we've come close, but we've never had a nuclear disaster because a nuclear war because of all the activity that had come forward in the old Soviet Union.
Right. And during the late 60s through the 70s, the U.S. and Russia, it was like a new era in ICBMs where you could put a number of warheads on top of an ICBM, and just so one ICBM taking off, and it could individually target maybe 6 or 7 enemy cities. That's a lot of firepower. So the U.S. put them in. The Russians kept them mobile, most of them, but the U.S. put them in these silos out in the American Midwest. And as soon as they started building these things, UFOs started showing up over them. When the missiles were installed, UFOs would show up and shut off the power to these nuclear sites. They'd change the targeting on the nose cone, if you can believe it, and just do all kinds of strange things to basically our national security. And it went on for years, and the Air Force knew about it. Parade magazine, which is a fairly well-known publication, Sunday publication here in the U.S., more so back then. They did a big story on it. And Peter Jennings also did a story on it, about 2 or 3 years before he died. And, something was happening to our nuclear forces, that where these UFOs could show up and literally shut down our nuclear force. Now, and then as it turns out, as you say, once the Soviet Union fell and we were able to get more information out of that place, it turns out that, similar things were happening over there too. So, people, it really is good grist, let's say, for people who say, UFOs are here to prevent us, from killing each other. I agree with you. I think we've come more than several times close to nuclear accidents because, UFOs like starting. I know they started a launch sequence at a Russian ICBM base in the Ukraine. It was like 20 seconds before they started launching missiles at the United States, and all of a sudden they shot them. The UFO shut them down. I mean, that's someone fooling around with nuclear technology, and it's not us. And it's not the Russians, obviously, so it's got to be somebody, and who knows?
Yeah, that's just it. Who knows? You have no idea what really has happened or what could have happened. And but I'm like you. I think a lot of this may actually be either our ancestors that had maybe traveled to another planet or another civilization, or our descendants evolved and are coming back. But I think a lot of the disasters that could have happened in our history have been avoided.
Mm-hmm. Well, we've come close. You know, I mean, really, think about it. We have come close, and I think that a lot of people, me included, and who wouldn't want this to be the case, that to think that, hey, maybe they are looking out for us. Maybe they're here to, as I say, prevent us from maybe wiping out the planet. I mean, they haven't been too good in preventing us from fighting each other, but they do seem to look into, any Foo Fighter reports, that I've ever seen that we've put in the books and so on. These things are always just kind of observing. They're never taking any kind of military action against us, against our bombers, against anyone. They're always just kind of there. And in all the stories in UFOs in wartime, I think there's maybe 4 where, UFOs have actually, kind of shot at somebody. And then we have, hundreds of other reports where they're just kind of, looking in, just kind of looking in, watching us, what we're doing. And that's it, that time travel thing, or the time tourist thing, I think would be an interesting, if it turned out to be something like that, I think it'd be very cool.
Well, I'll be honest with you. I have heard a few stories of something similar to that, like where experiencers would tell me that they would see these things. These things would come through portals, and it's almost like they were taking a tour. Mm-hmm. Like they were fascinated with us and how we live. And, when you first hear something like that, you think, oh, come on. But when you start hearing more and more and more of it, and, it's got to be something to it. It really does.
Right. It's someone once, I was in some discussion somewhere, and we might have put this in the book too. They equated it to if one of us went on a safari. Okay, so if we were going to go on a safari, we would get on a plane, we'd fly from the U.S., we'd go to Africa, we'd land, we'd get on one of those buses that goes out in the savannah, right? And you watch the lions eat the antelopes and that kind of stuff, right? You see now those animals, they're used to it. If you see that like a National Geographic or something, the big cats will come right up to the trucks, okay? And they're almost like, they don't know, the animals don't know what we're doing there. They don't have any sense of a safari or people being tourists or anything. They're just there. And they go about their daily business, and sometimes there happens to be a truck there. Well, it's like, it could be the same for us. We see UFOs all the time. Maybe just like the animal can't, understand how a truck works and what a tourist is, maybe we can't understand what a UFO is, but they're there all the time. They're watching us, just like, someone on a safari watches the animals, running around in the savannah or whatever. So it could be something like that. It's just something that we don't, we're not of a higher intelligence enough to understand what UFOs are, just like the animals don't know what the hell we are, really.
Now, I didn't get a chance to read this chapter, but the title kind of intrigues me, and I may have an idea of what you're talking about. It's titled "My Beef with Spielberg."
Oh, gee, okay.
Would this have anything to do with Close Encounters?
Yeah. See, this is there are some stories in there that are just like kind of my own personal stories, and I went to and they make fun of me on our radio show, all the time when I bring this up. But I went to film school. I went to Emerson College in Boston for graduate school, and it was cool. It was 3 years of watching movies and learning how movies were made and so on. And so I got a little bit of knowledge about how behind the scenes how movies put together. So anytime I see a movie, I look for the mistakes. You know what I mean? I really, it's hard for me to enjoy a movie because I'm always looking for the goof ups. So, but
like me, I'm the same way.
And there's some movies that they're bad, but they're good at the same time, and you don't mind them having like I love grade B movies, grade B sci-fi movies. I just love that kind of stuff. But with Spielberg, he's obviously one of the most successful directors ever. And he does big budget films and so on, but in my mind, he's a successful director, but he's not a great director because he has a hard time telling a story. If you really look at some of his movies, in Close Encounters is the perfect example. I love that movie. I did part of my dissertation on Close Encounters, but if you sit and watch it, it really doesn't make a lot of sense, and it's an unbalanced movie. And I know it came out in the mid '70s, and probably people listening to us now maybe have never seen it. Right. I would say go see it, but it's don't expect any good effects because there was very, very primitive special effects. But the story is just a lot of the story has to do with Richard Dreyfuss, building mountains made up out of potatoes and mashed potatoes in his house. I mean, as crazy as that sounds. That somehow links to this landing of this majestic flying saucer out on Devil's Tower in Wyoming. It's not told in the right way, and maybe only film students like me can tell. But with Close Encounters, with AI, when he did AI, which is basically taking Stanley Kubrick's script and making the movie AI, that movie's terrible. I mean, if you sit there and watch that, there's so many plot holes in it, and it like missing scenes and stuff like that. War of the Worlds with Tom Cruise, which was a pretty good movie. It's a great movie, special effects wise, but and that was a very successful movie. But at the end, we talk about how the Martians have like absolutely destroyed the Earth. They've destroyed the Earth, and especially Boston, where I'm from, if you can't tell by my accent. And and Tom Cruise, basically the movie is Tom Cruise taking his kids. He's divorced. He's taking his kids to the safety of their mother in Boston. He has this long trip and, runs into the aliens and so on. And at the end, when he finally does return the kids, the mother comes out. Now, this is every place has been destroyed except this little piece of Boston, I guess, where the mother is. And it's like nothing's happened. There's like a few more leaves on the street, and and that's it. And she comes out and she's all dressed, and she might as well have like a cup of coffee. It was just so, it just didn't match up. It just didn't match up. And I know he wanted to do that big ending, and it's really basically the ending of the movie The Searchers with John Wayne. He just kind of copped that, but it's not good movie making. It's successful movie making, but it's not good movie making. So that's my beef with him. That's the long way of telling you that's what my beef is.
And that movie is kind of so anticlimactic too. I mean, at the end, they just, a bacteria got to him, and that was it.
Yeah, I mean and that was it. I mean, and that's from the original story. And the movie that they made in the early '50s with Gene Barry is a really good movie. That sticks a little bit more towards to the original. And it has some cool special effects in it, even though it's like early '50s, and and that's a really kind of compelling movie, the first one, and the one with Tom Cruise is too. They make a big mistake at the beginning, because at the very beginning, Tom Cruise's character runs one of those cranes, like at the port of Bayonne, I think. Those tall cranes that take those containers off the container ships, and then it shows him, and he goes home to let's say his modest house. And I remember seeing that, and I wanted to say, if I had Spielberg in front of me, I'd say, "Do you have any idea how much money those guys make? They're not living in Bayonne. I'm sorry, they're not. They make about $150,000 a year.
Yeah, longshoremen do pretty well.
Yeah. You ain't, and the guy and those crane operators, are at top of the heap. So, they kind of get that wrong, and it's stuff like that. And he has stuff in his movies where I know you can just tell he's saying, "Oh, we'll let the audience figure it out." You're not supposed to do that in movies. If you put something on the screen, you have to explain it.
Well, I tell you, my biggest beef with Spielberg, and I love his movies, but I tell you, Poltergeist was the movie that really got me, because that whole phenomena in that Poltergeist movie has nothing to do with Poltergeist.
Mm-hmm. Right? Yeah. Sure.
It's like they built the house on top of a cemetery that they kept the bodies in. They never removed the bodies. Mm-hmm. Well, I'm sorry, that's not a poltergeist. Mm-hmm. And I guess they had to use the name. I had talked to one of the associates, the guy by the name of Victor, who I did the movie with Spielberg, and there was a big discussion not using the actual name of the book for that movie, because it really had nothing to do with Poltergeist, and I think they realized that. Mm-hmm. But that's something that's always bothered me.
Well, they need a name. They needed a cool name, and they used it. Now some of Spielberg's movies are like Minority Report, which is something that a lot of people really haven't seen, but that's a great movie. That's one of his best movies that I've seen him.
I agree with you.
But Saving Private Ryan, just not to go down this road too far, but if you watch Private Ryan, which is a great anti-war movie, I think that should be shown to every high school kid before you go join the Marines or the Army or whatever. Watch that movie, because it really depicts as close as I think you can possibly get to what real war is. People just sudden death and just gory and terrible, and it's not all this heroism stuff. So they depict that very well. But the plot of the movie is that there are four brothers. Three of them have been killed in action, so they got to go get Private Ryan, the last brother, because basically the White House doesn't want the bad publicity of four kids dying. So the message comes to the D-Day landing site. You have to go and get this guy and bring him back. You got to go find him. Okay. And the president wants you to do this. Okay. So they send out 5 guys on foot. No, you'd send like 40 tanks. I mean, seriously, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
You wouldn't send 5 guys on foot, and they don't even save them as it turns out, and there's what, so it's stuff like that really bugs me.
Yeah, you look at movies the same way I do. I mean, it's, there was another movie that, I enjoy the movie. It's got a good story to it, but it's just so much fluff to it, and that's the Independence Day, the first one. The second one is just nothing. But there's just so much fluff to it.
Yep.
It's anyone that's interested in UFOs and possible Australian, I mean, come on. It's just impossible to even believe all that.
Right.
The fact that if they had that technology, we wouldn't even have a fight. Right. We wouldn't have any way of even fighting them at all.
Right. Right. So, I mean, see, there's a perfect example of, someone said, let's do a summer blockbuster movie. And talking about Spielberg real quick, Jaws was like the first summer blockbuster movie. Looking back on it now, it seems like they've been with us forever. But by mistake, that movie was supposed to come out in like February, and he was over the deadline, and so they had to delay the release of Jaws to the summer of, I think, 75. And they didn't know what they were doing, but what they were doing was they were creating this whole idea of a summer blockbuster because it was the first summer blockbuster. People didn't want to go swimming. People didn't want to go into the ocean. It's like a real, kind of, cultural thing, So we can't, but Independence Day, I didn't see the second one because the first one was bad enough. It's like, all right, they just threw millions of dollars, lots of special effects and so on. But if you look at the story is, I mean, there's coincidences and, people bump into each other and, happen to have this information. It's like, oh, man, come on. Put a little thought into it, please.
I was, it's funny. I was in Plymouth, Massachusetts for about 2 weeks the summer after the movie was released. Mm-hmm. And those beaches were empty.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's
the truth. I mean, they were empty.
That's where we live, and I gotta say, in their defense, the water's really cold up here, man.
I know.
Even in the summer, you can jump in that water, and it's like, oh man, it's like jumping into a bucket of ice cubes or something. So.
Well, it's funny because, of course, the story was that 25-foot great white, but I tell you, they got some damn big fish in Cape Cod Bay.
Oh yeah.
I saw some really big sharks while I was there during those 2 weeks.
Right.
So but they spooked them. That movie, that was an amazing movie. I mean, I happened to have been in New York maybe it was just a day or two when the movie came out. I mean, they had lines like 3 blocks down the street. It was amazing.
Right. Yeah. Oh yeah, because people are saying, wow, we can't go in the water because of sharks. Well, let's go see the movie, I mean, it was the perfect storm of, they didn't know what they were doing. They just kind of, fell upon this, and it made Spielberg what he is,
Sure.
I mean, let's face it, and they made, I think, 4 or 5 of them, maybe 4 of them.
After the first one, I didn't bother.
The third one, some reason I saw the third one, I was like, oh, this is terrible. And I just saw the first one a year ago. I hadn't seen it. And then it was funny, this summer we went down to Martha's Vineyard and for a few days, and I'd never been out there, but you're right there where they filmed it. The bridge, the beach, and everything. It's like he filmed it right there in Oak Bluffs, Martha's Vineyard. So it's kind of cool to see, the actual setting of the place. But Jaws and a blockbuster movie, but not a perfect movie.
Now you do have a chapter about NASA conspiracies, and I don't know how much of it I really don't believe much of, if any, of the so-called NASA conspiracies. But I got to talk to you about it because, of course, there's a lot of people that believe the moon landings were fake.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about that?
No, they weren't a fake. They actually went to the moon, and there's lots and lots of evidence of it. One of them is that one of the Apollo landings there, they actually put a laser reflector on the moon, and scientists every day around the world shoot laser beams up at this thing, and the laser beam comes back, and they measure the time it goes up and down, and that's how they can tell the distance from the Earth to the moon. There's a Japanese satellite that is in low orbit around the moon and has been for years. And I think there's a website where you can go on it and actually, see it in live real time. And, occasionally they'll go over, an Apollo landing site, and the stuff is still there.
Right?
Yeah, a lot of the equipment is still there. And then we talk about conspiracies a lot on our radio show. And we always come down to this, is that the number of people that would have to be involved in a conspiracy to fake the moon landings, you're not talking about like a dozen people. You're talking about thousands of people who would have to be involved in this conspiracy to fool everybody, fool, people saw the rocket take off. People see the astronauts going into the Saturn V rocket. They see it go out. Where do they go?
Yeah, that's right.
During all this, where they're supposed to be doing this in a movie set or something like that. No, they went there, and here's another thing too. Not only would this have to be like a massive conspiracy, you probably have to involve as many people in the conspiracy as you would involve actually getting somebody on the moon, and all this time. No one has ever stepped forward and said, I was part of the moon landing conspiracy. Here's all the evidence, cut and dry, 100%. It's always these things. Well, there's no stars in the background. There's no this. There's no that. There's reasons for that, and I think because the reflection off of the powder on the moon actually washes out the stars. They were there. The equipment is still there. And there's just, so much proof that, it actually happened that, it's, in my opinion, it's kind of nutty to think that it didn't.
Yeah. But there's one thing about the Apollo program that I do believe is that there's a lot that I believe they did find that just hasn't been disclosed.
Mm. Well, the astronauts have said that, that they were followed by, objects all the way, from Earth to the moon. They weren't flying saucers, but they were, I know at least in a couple of them, the astronauts would just kind of routinely say, we see something, it's been trailing us, since, we left Earth orbit or whatever. And that's really kind of against the laws of physics, unless the thing has its own kind of propulsion. How would it be following the Apollo capsule? So, and there are times, and even there are times during then when the astronauts would go to a special channel, and for the most part, all their communications were public. Anyone could listen to them, but they did go to these special channels every once in a while where they would have, let's say, confidential conversation. And the International Space Station does the same thing. They go to some kind of channel, a different channel, and they have a private conversation, so you think, well, what are they talking about? What are they talking about? What else could they be talking about? You're
well, the earlier flights, especially the Apollo 8 flight that orbited the moon, so they could go to the dark side and around and judge to what kind of propulsion they would need to get back and such. But there was a lot to that one too. I mean, Frank Borman has kind of been quiet about that all these years, about some of the things that occurred during that mission. And that's what kind of interests me now with the Chinese visiting now on the dark side, and what is there.
Right. It's like it's basically the side we never see.
Right.
Because the moon revolves as the Earth revolves, but the unusual thing, let's say, is that we revolve at the same speed. So one face is always pointing towards us.
Right.
Right. So, but that other side, it isn't in the dark all the time. It's just like we can't see it when it's in the light. So, but we've gone around there. We've, all the Apollo missions, went in orbit around the moon. And now this Chinese, thing. I think it's an interesting place to land a space capsule. To tell you the truth, or a lunar rover. I'll give them that much. I hate to say it, but I think that that there's going to be. Whoa, here's NASA calling right now. Wow. Who knows what could be over there. But we've had satellites, revolving around the moon, and all of the moon really has been photographed and kind of documented and mapped. But I was going to say, I hate to say it, but I think the Chinese, and if the U.S. doesn't get their act in gear, and if NASA is just, kind of this semi-government agency that, sucks a lot of money. And, what have we done? What have we done in the since the space shuttle? What have we done? It's going to be the Chinese who are going to, everyone's talking about going to Mars. They're probably going to be the first people on Mars.
That may very well be, because you're going to have to set up a station of some type on the moon to be able to get to Mars, I believe.
Well, that's one of the plans, and it's a little bit easier to lift a large payload off of the moon to go to Mars than it does for the United States. So the idea is like go back to the moon, build up a large payload rocket and so on, and then launch from there to go to Mars. But my question is we were on the moon. We landed on the moon in 1969, and then Nixon, because he was, who knows what, he cut off all funding for all Apollo flights afterwards. We were supposed to go up to like Apollo 22, 23, and the plan was just to keep on going there to set up a base. But, they cut the funding just at the absolutely wrong time. Now we have to go through all this to get back to the moon, and then from the moon go to Mars. There's a lot of moving parts there.
Well, I'm of the theory, and I've only had this theory for the past several years, that I believe that these space agency worldwide are just working together now. I mean, for everything. And I'm just not saying the fact that, we spent time on the Skylab and in the International Space Station together here and there. I think there's been a conglomeration for a lot of years. And I believe a lot of that started right after the Apollo missions. Mm-hmm. I think there's something to that.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I just know that the whole idea is that it takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of money, it takes a lot of technology and so on, like even just to put the space shuttle up, okay?
Yeah.
And what I always think is that, if we really had, not to disagree with you, but if we really had some kind of, technology, either from, this conglomeration of space programs or or something that's been re-engineered from a UFO or whatever, would we have really spent those billions of dollars over like 25 years to launch this dump truck, which was the space shuttle, basically what it was? You're launching a dump truck into orbit. Wouldn't we be flying around the solar system if we had the kind of technology that some people say we have?
You would think. Yeah, you would think. I mean, the space shuttle, what, when you look at it as a whole, what did it really accomplish other than sending payloads to the international?
That's all it did. Mm-hmm.
Well, that was it.
That's all it did. I mean, it brought payloads. That's what I mean. It was a dump truck in space. It did a lot of military missions. There was a lot of those were secret military missions where the military would literally lease the space shuttle and launch, who knows what. And one of the other things we talk about in the book is that the military now has this thing called the X-37B. And it looks like a miniature space shuttle. It looks like a space shuttle 25% size, okay, quarter size. Now, this thing is launched out of Vandenberg Air Force Base out in California. Mm-hmm. It just broke the record for the longest spacecraft in flight. It was actually in orbit for a year. It's robotic. But one of our co-hosts, Commander Cobra, who was someone who it was in the military and works closely still with the military, he swears that in about several hours you could actually turn this thing into a manned spacecraft, and no one really knows what it does. Now the theory is that this thing can actually go up there and cozy up to, let's say, adversaries satellites, and steal their information, disable them, steal the technology. Who knows? But it has to be something along those lines. The military says that they're doing atmospheric research, which is not even a good spin story, but it's doing something. Now that's really kind of cool technology when you think about it.
Right.
And no one can touch that. No one can. The Chinese can put something on the backside of the moon, but this thing is up there all the time, doing who knows what. That to me, that is the Space Force, if you know what I mean. This stuff is going on. You don't really need a Space Force. We have a Space Force. We have U.S. Space Command, and it's been around for a long, long time. If you want to have a real cool Space Force, put money into that, because these people, they're already there. You don't have to start from square one.
Well, I think, and I don't know how much of this you agree with the fact that a lot of corporations and private money is going into space exploration. I'm wary of that for the most part. I don't know if it's more of an exploration or if there's more of a monetary reason behind it. Mm-hmm. They've been talking for years about mining asteroids and such. So
right.
I don't know.
It's always a monetary thing.
Yeah, you would think.
With private industry, that's the only reason they would do it. And at some point, I think they will start mining asteroids. There's some asteroids that are just completely comprised of like nickel, and all these kind of exotic things. But someone said too is that they suspect some asteroids may have lots of diamonds in them. And in fact, there's a star out there that people think that, astrophysicists think is made of diamond, and or a planet going around a star. But the thing is let's say that you found an asteroid that was, that was just full of diamonds, and you stop mining them, bring them back to Earth. Well, that's going to make, the rarity of diamonds on a whole not be as rare anymore.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? So they won't be, so it's like, wow, how do you handle that?
Well, I guess you could use it for industrial use, but I don't know. That seems, I agree with you. I mean, that's like any rare metal or gemstone. If they just start finding a bunch of them, they're just going to tank the market.
Right. Oh, yeah, exactly. So you got to be careful with your mine up there. But I guess if you could corral an asteroid that was made of, different kinds of very strong iron and nickel and these things that, a lot of them go into our smartphones and stuff like that, then there's your monetary incentive right there.
Oh, yeah. The what are your thoughts on our technology? In other words, it does seem that ever since, and I'll say Roswell, and that our technology just seems to quadruple every couple of years. Is it something that we're getting from somewhere else, or is it just that we're getting smarter?
I think we're getting smarter. I don't think, this is probably, a subject for another show, but I don't think anything happened in Roswell other than what, the military came out and finally said it was one of these secret balloons. Mm-hmm. And, that's what the debris was and so on and so forth. And again, I don't think that we would have this reverse engineer technology because I don't see it around. I know we've gotten smarter, but once again, if you were able to reverse engineer a UFO, why don't we have anti-gravity? Why don't we have, these kind of weird propulsion systems? Why are we launching the dump truck into space? I don't think you would go through all that just to keep hidden that we have this kind of, UFO technology. But, and it also, in my mind too, and it sounds strange because, it's all Big Brother / big company, but it's kind of dissing the people who invented this stuff. It's human beings who invented, the semiconductors, who invented, the rockets that put us on the moon, and these are humans doing this, and and when they should be given some credit for doing it, and yet some people want to say, well, it's really kind of re-engineered UFO technology. Well, if it did, then we haven't been to the moon in so long. Why aren't we there? Why aren't you and I flying back and forth every day to the moon?
Exactly.
We're not.
Well, and if the one thing about this that really fascinates me more than anything is, you look at the computer that was used in the Apollo landing,
right,
as compared to what we've got nowadays,
right,
and when you sit there and look at it, you wonder how in the hell did they ever get there and back?
Yep, there's more computing power in a calculator than there was in the first Apollo lander. How did they do it? You're right. How did they do it? But they did it.
They did it. The computer itself was so, I don't know, it was so fundamental. I mean, they were pushing buttons.
Right. Yeah.
To activate actuators or capacitors, and it was so simple. But I don't know. But it is a fascinating aspect to that whole program. I guess it took a lot of luck too, I guess, but it was the whole Apollo story has always fascinated me, and I just wondered how did they ever do it? But you're right. Why haven't we gone back? Why is the money had not been spent? For years they keep talking about this helium-3 that's loaded on the moon if they could get there and mine this helium-3 and for energy. Like, why hasn't there been any attempt to do that?
I think it's because NASA basically, has been our only way for this country to get into space. Now,
that's true.
Now you can see, Elon Musk and those guys, are flying, supply missions to the International Space Station, and then the guy who runs Virgin Airlines, he's going to start, booking passage for people who go up in suborbit and stuff like that. So it is coming, but it's very slow, to work into it for the private enterprise to get in there, because it costs a lot of money.
Right.
But once it happens, Lon, once it starts, then there'll be no way of stopping it.
That's true.
And once someone starts really seeing dollar signs, that's when then it will be like the Jetsons. Then it will be like commonplace to go to orbit, to go to the moon. I still think it's far off, and I hate to say this, but I don't think the Americans are going to lead the charge. I think it's going to be the Chinese.
Yeah, I think the Chinese are really stepping it up. It does seem that way.
Yep, they get a lot of money. They get a lot of technology. A lot of their scientists and professionals are actually educated in this country, and then they go back to China, and that's just the way it is. But the Chinese, they're the ultimate big brother government. I mean, they're the ultimate totalitarian government. They're the largest country in the world. They're going to be one of the largest military powers in the next 30 to 40 years, if not sooner. It's. I think that the days, the coming century, the rest of the century is not going to be one for like democracy and freedom of speech and things. I think it's going to be a rough 80 years, to tell you the truth, because I think the Chinese are going to dominate, and they're not going to suddenly become, a democracy. That's for sure.
Well, I'm afraid you're probably right, because it seems like our time has passed for the most part, and I'm hoping that maybe these entrepreneurs can kind of push us back ahead and get us back on track, but I'm not holding my breath.
Our time is passing. It's slipping away from us.
Yes, it is.
It isn't gone yet, but look what happened to the British Empire, to the Roman Empire, to the Greek Empire. I mean, empires come and go.
Yes, they do.
We still have time to fix what our problems are, but time is running out for sure.
So, Mac, why don't you tell everybody how they can get a hold of you, get your books, and tell us what you have planned for the future.
Well, the book is on sale. Mack Maloney's Haunted Universe is the best place to go, really, is Amazon.com. barnesandnoble.com. But really, in any bookstore, if they don't have it, they can order it for you. Some of these bookstores now, someone was telling me, have printers right in the bookstore where you go in and you order a book and they'll print the book for you in 2 minutes, which is kind of cool.
Yeah.
But really, right now, Amazon.com is the best place to get Mack Maloney's Haunted Universe. And then we do our show, Mack Maloney's Military X-Files. We do it once a week. We're on a bunch of different networks. We're on KCOR and Dark Matter, and over in the UK and also up in Canada. And, we have a lot of fun doing that. And between that and the series I write called the Wingman series, which is what I've been doing for for many years, I'm going to start Wingman 19 very soon. Wingman is kind of like this Zen fighter pilot. He's the best fighter pilot ever, and also a series called Codename Starman, which is about a military Navy investigator with ESP, and that's going to be coming out soon too. So. I didn't think I was as busy as I just said I am, but I guess I'm busy.
Yeah, I think we all are kind of more busy than what we think we are.
Right, yeah.
So, Mac, thanks again for joining me.
Thanks, Lon.
You take care now.
Okay, I had a good time. Thanks for having me on.
Now, listeners can show their support for Arcane Radio by becoming a patron. Simply go to phantomsandmonsters.com and click the Podbean patron banner. Arcane Radio also accepts direct donations. If you have an unexplained encounter or sighting, feel free to contact me through the Phantoms and Monsters blog site. I want to again thank Mack Maloney for joining me this evening, and want to thank you for listening to the show. Good night, and have a great weekend.